8 seconds after it began, the match was already over. No one in the room had raised their voice. No strike echoed loudly enough to explain what happened. The Muay Thai champion remained standing, uninjured, untouched in any obvious way. Bruce Lee stepped back first. Witnesses say the air changed before anyone understood why. What followed was not a defeat recorded on paper, but a silence that traveled with the challenger for years. The method was never announced. Only the outcome became unavoidable. The room itself was never meant to host a moment like this. It was not an arena. There were no banners, no judges' tables, no elevated corners to suggest ceremony. Witnesses remember it as a borrowed space. Plain walls, worn flooring, the faint smell of sweat that lingered long after training sessions ended. A place used for work, not spectacle. There were rules, but none written down. They existed only through shared understanding, shaped by tradition and pride. No rounds were agreed upon. No winner would be announced. The unspoken agreement was simpler and heavier. Both men would step forward, and whatever happened would be accepted as truth. Those present did not consider themselves an audience. They were practitioners, students, and intermediaries, people accustomed to seeing dominance established through repetition and force. They came not to be entertained, but to witness clarity. Each carried their own assumptions into the room, formed long before that day. Muay Thai, to many there, represented proven reality. It was visible, measurable, and already tested in public rings. Its champions were shaped by crowds, bloodied under lights, and validated through record and ritual. The discipline had structure. It had lineage. It had weight. What Bruce Lee represented was harder to place. There was no uniform consensus on what he practiced or where he fit. Some saw him as an innovator, others as a disruptor. A few quietly dismissed him as theoretical, quick, intelligent, but untested against a system built for confrontation. The room did not challenge those assumptions. Its narrowness compressed attention inward. There was no space to retreat into performance. Every sound felt close. Every breath was noticed. Even before either man moved, posture alone began to speak. Bruce Lee did not inspect the room. He did not stretch theatrically or assert presence. He stood as though the environment required no adjustment. Witnesses recall his stillness as neutral, not relaxed, not tense, simply prepared, without announcement. The Muay Thai fighter, by contrast, carried himself as expected. Balanced, grounded, openly confident. His stance communicated familiarity with scrutiny. He had learned how to occupy space without effort. This was not arrogance. It was confirmation. Between them, no words were exchanged that anyone remembers clearly. No challenge. No explanation. Silence filled the gap where ceremony usually lived. The absence of formality did not lower the stakes. It sharpened them. In that moment, before movement, the room settled into its true role. It became a container for comparison, not of styles but of understanding. And once that comparison began, there would be no way to reverse it. Before either of them moved, one presence was already fully formed in the minds of the room. The Muay Thai fighter did not need introduction. His reputation had arrived ahead of him, carried through stories repeated with consistency. Victories remembered clearly. Losses, if any, rarely mentioned. He had stood across from trained opponents under rules that rewarded endurance and punishment, and he had remained composed within them. His body reflected that history, conditioned not for demonstration, but for survival under pressure. Those watching understood what he represented. A system proven through resistance. A language spoken fluently by pain and persistence. His stance was familiar to everyone there. Nothing about it asked questions. It answered them. The weight distribution, the calm breathing, the forward presence. It communicated readiness without haste. He had nothing to prove, and that itself carried authority. Bruce Lee's reputation, by contrast, arrived fragmented. Some knew him through film, others through private instruction. A few had heard him described in contradictory terms: brilliant, unconventional, incomplete. He was associated with speed, philosophy, and ideas that unsettled rigid systems. But there was no shared agreement on how those ideas behaved under direct opposition. This imbalance shaped expectation. Several witnesses later admitted they were watching Bruce Lee more closely than his counterpart, not out of admiration, but assessment. They were looking for confirmation, either of promise or of limitation. The Muay Thai fighter was assumed complete. Bruce Lee was assumed questionable. Lee did not address that imbalance. He did not counter it with confidence displays or verbal clarification. He did not adjust his posture to signal equivalence. He allowed the comparison to remain uneven, as though it had no relevance to what would follow. That restraint unsettled a few observers. Confidence they were accustomed to, indifference less so. As the moment approached, attention subtly shifted. Not because Bruce Lee demanded it, but because he did not respond to expectation. His stillness did not mirror his opponent's readiness. It ignored it. There was no mirroring, no challenge, no attempt to establish hierarchy. This absence of reaction created a quiet tension. The Muay Thai fighter, experienced and perceptive, noticed it. His expression did not change, but witnesses recall a slight adjustment in his footing. Nothing dramatic, just enough to acknowledge uncertainty. In combat, unfamiliar behavior often carries more weight than aggression. Reputation had set the stage. Assumption had chosen its side. What remained was the moment when those assumptions would be tested, not through declaration, but through contact. And that moment, once initiated, would allow no reinterpretation. As the space between them closed, the room became unusually quiet. No one had been instructed to stay silent. It happened naturally, as though the atmosphere itself had recognized the importance of restraint. The observers were not waiting for impact. They were waiting for confirmation of what they already believed, or of something they could not yet articulate. Time stretched in subtle ways. Each breath became perceptible. Each shift of weight registered more clearly than expected. The absence of movement began to feel intentional. The Muay Thai fighter remained composed, but his attention sharpened. This was not the anticipation of violence. It was calculation. He had faced hesitation before, but this was different. Bruce Lee's stillness did not read as caution. It did not suggest uncertainty. It felt deliberate, as though he were allowing the situation to reveal itself rather than forcing it forward. For those watching, this created discomfort. They were accustomed to engagement marking the beginning of truth. Here, truth seemed to be forming before anything visible occurred. The longer nothing happened, the more the pressure accumulated, not between the two men, but among the witnesses themselves. A few later admitted they felt compelled to lean forward, as if proximity might explain what patience could not. Bruce Lee's eyes remained level, not fixed, not wandering, aware without appearing to search. There was no dramatic adjustment, no ritualized motion to signal readiness. He did not test distance in the way fighters usually do. Instead, he allowed distance to exist unchallenged, as though it were already understood. The Muay Thai fighter, trained to read intent through motion, found little to interpret. That absence of signal disrupted rhythm. In systems built on reaction, unpredictability creates delay. And delay, however brief, carries consequence. Someone in the room shifted their footing. Another cleared their throat and stopped midway. The sound of fabric brushing against skin seemed unusually loud. The environment had become an amplifier. This was the moment when expectation reached its highest point, not through escalation but suspension. It was clear to everyone that once movement occurred, there would be no gradual exchange, no feeling out process, The space did not allow it. The context did not invite it. Whatever happened next would define the entire encounter. The Muay Thai fighter subtly engaged forward intention. Not aggressively, professionally. It was the decision point, the acknowledgement that waiting had reached its limit. Bruce Lee did not respond outwardly. He did not shift stance. He did not raise his hands. He did not announce readiness. And in that refusal to perform readiness, something began to tilt. The room sensed it before it could name it. The moment of action had arrived, not with sound, but with inevitability. What happened next was brief enough that memory struggled to organize it. There was movement, but not the kind that signals a fight beginning. No sudden charge. No audible collision. Witnesses describe it as a change in alignment rather than an exchange. Positions altered, balance reconsidered, space redefined. The Muay Thai fighter initiated forward pressure. It was controlled, habitual, correct. The motion was meant to establish range and authority in the same instant. In most encounters, it would have done exactly that. Bruce Lee moved only as much as necessary. Those closest recall his motion as almost incomplete, as though something expected had been removed. There was no visible wind-up. No committed strike that could be followed by the eye. His body adjusted, then returned to stillness before observers fully registered the adjustment. 8 seconds passed. Some believed it was less. There was no sound that marked the end. No fall. No gasp. Both men remained standing. At a distance, it appeared unresolved. But those trained to notice detail saw something had shifted irreversibly. The Muay Thai fighter's posture changed first. Not dramatically, just enough. His shoulders no longer carried certainty. His stance, once settled, began to float, searching for reference. He had not been struck in any obvious way, yet his forward intent had dissolved. Witnesses later struggled to describe why. Some mentioned pressure in places they could not see. Others spoke of timing, of being interrupted mid-decision. One observer, a coach, said only that the exchange ended before it began. Bruce Lee stepped back. It was not a retreat. It was a release, as though he had completed something internal and no longer needed proximity. His expression remained unchanged. He did not watch for reaction. He did not wait for acknowledgement. The Muay Thai fighter did not pursue. That was what unsettled the room most. In competitive contexts, hesitation invites continuation. Here, continuation never came. The challenger remained still, eyes focused, breathing measured, but something essential had been removed. The will to press forward had vanished without explanation. 8 seconds had passed. The room did not respond immediately. There was no signal that the encounter had concluded, yet no one moved to extend it. The absence of follow-up became its own conclusion. Bruce Lee made no claim. He did not speak. He did not gesture. He did not assert outcome. And because nothing was declared, nothing could be disputed. What remained was a shared recognition, quiet, unspoken, that whatever had occurred could not be corrected by trying again. The fight, such as it was, had already ended. And the meaning of that ending had only begun to settle. After the movement ceased, time resumed unevenly. No one stepped forward to announce a result. No voice attempted to interpret what had happened while it was still fresh. The silence that followed was not awkward, it was analytical. The room had entered a phase of processing without language. The Muay Thai fighter remained where he was. He adjusted his breathing first, slow and controlled, as though recovering from exertion that no one else had seen. His eyes did not leave Bruce Lee, yet they no longer searched for openings. They assessed something internal, something unsettled. Those closest noticed his hands relax, then tighten again without purpose. His stance, once habitual, required correction. He made those corrections carefully, as if unsure which version of himself was now appropriate. There was no injury to examine. no visible impact to justify restraint. And that absence created a deeper disruption than damage would have. In combat disciplines, cause and effect are expected to align. Pain explains hesitation. Fatigue explains retreat. Here, no explanation presented itself. The Muay Thai fighter had encountered a disruption without a source he could identify. He did not request a reset. This too was noticed. In similar situations, pride often demands repetition, to reclaim authority, to reassert hierarchy. But here, repetition offered no clarity. Whatever had been challenged was not technical. It was not strategic in the conventional sense. It was foundational. Witnesses later recalled that Bruce Lee had already turned slightly away, not dismissively, but conclusively. His attention had moved on without ceremony. He neither watched for reaction nor prepared for continuation. The encounter for him was complete. That finality carried weight. The Muay Thai fighter did not object. He did not pursue explanation from Lee or from anyone else in the room. He stood quietly, absorbing a realization that could not be shared without losing its precision. One observer later said it felt like watching someone realize a door they had always relied on no longer existed. The room slowly began to exhale. People shifted. Someone sat down. Another checked the time, surprised by how little had passed. A few exchanged brief looks, not of triumph but of recalibration. Something they believed to be solid had revealed itself as conditional. There was no argument afterward. No debate. No recounting of techniques. No attempt to frame the moment as victory or defeat. The Muay Thai fighter gathered his belongings with care. His movements were deliberate, not hurried. Before leaving, he paused briefly, as though considering something he had not expected to carry with him. Bruce Lee did not remain to receive acknowledgement. He left the room as quietly as he had entered. What lingered was not an image of dominance, but of disruption, clean, contained, and irreversible. And in that disruption, a lesson formed without instruction. One that would take years to fully surface. In the years that followed, the encounter did not spread quickly. It was not the kind of story that benefits from repetition. There was no decisive image to circulate, no visible moment that could be replayed or exaggerated. It survived only through careful retelling, passed between practitioners who understood what to omit. Those who spoke of it rarely agreed on detail. Some remembered the timing differently. Others disagreed on distance, on posture, on sequence. What they did not disagree on was the effect. The Muay Thai fighter continued his career. He did not vanish, nor was he diminished publicly. But those who trained with him later noticed a change that could not be attributed to age. His approach became quieter. His engagements shorter. He spoke less about dominance and more about positioning, about entry and exit, about moments that end before impact. He never referenced the encounter directly. Bruce Lee's path, already moving toward refinement rather than accumulation, did not alter visibly. If anything, the incident blended seamlessly into his broader trajectory. There was no mention of it in his teachings. No example drawn from it. Those close to him later said that was intentional. A demonstration, once explained, loses its function. Over time, the story acquired its shape, not as a victory, but as a reference point. It became a way of describing an idea without naming it. When practitioners spoke of efficiency without effort, of outcomes achieved before escalation, someone would eventually mention the room, the silence, the 8 seconds. Not as proof, as reminder. Decades later, the story remained intact because it resisted distortion. There was nothing to inflate, no aggression to admire, no humiliation to justify. It endured because it pointed away from spectacle and toward understanding. Those who heard it often fell silent afterward. Not impressed, not inspired, reoriented. The incident did not produce a champion or a fallen legend. It produced a recalibration, one that continued quietly, long after both men had moved on. And in that silence, the story completed its work. Not by teaching what to do, but by revealing when nothing more is required.